Okay, well, I'm so pleased to be here again today with all of you, and I'm looking forward to the day. What I want to stress is that the core of what I'm talking about is, first of all, love. Loving yourself, loving other people. They're not two different things. And of course, having compassion for yourself and having compassion for other people. I started out yesterday with a little exercise of loving yourself. And what frequently happens is people don't think they are worthy of receiving love. They're not worthy of loving themselves. And totally convinced at that. I said yesterday that people if they would rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10, would be just above a mass murderer. And it sounds bizarre, but people feel that way, that they're totally bad. And it's your own imagination. That's all it is. It's just imagination. It's a world that you have created. If you were really that bad, somebody would arrest you and lock you up to protect you from yourself, if not protect the rest of the world from you. But quite honestly, if you were looked at realistically, if you deserved to be locked up, so would the rest of the world. I had an exercise yesterday, I called it prison break. Yeah. We're all in our own prison. And self-condemnation and self-loathing is one of the main aspects of that prison that we live in, and we need to escape from it. I decided this morning I believe you have a printer here. I can't imagine a business without a printer these days. I'm going to print out some copies of that exercise we did on prison break, and if people want that to take it home with them and do it, then you can do that. But remember that you are worthy of love, and that you can train yourself to love yourself. It's just a matter of training. You've learned to loathe yourself and feel that you're unworthy. In a way, it doesn't matter if the way you learned that was because of parents or people around you treating you like you were unworthy, or if it's something you learned on your own. Doesn't matter where it came from. Totally irrelevant, because that's past, and the past is past. What we're working with is the present. And so the present is that you are the one that is holding on to this judgment. And so all you have to work with is yourself. You don't have to convince the world that you are worthy. You don't have to convince people in the past that have told you you're unworthy. All you have to do is convince yourself. And in fact, this is what Buddhism is all about. Because ultimately, everybody here is already a completely enlightened Buddha from the standpoint of the ultimate. Everybody here is a fully enlightened Buddha. We all have Buddha nature. The problem is we're not convinced of this. And so there's a path that leads to convincing us that we are fully enlightened Buddhas. It's called Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. In Vajrayana, you actually visualize yourself as an enlightened being. And as Jessica said yesterday, it's like reframing. We're not creating a fantasy. What we're actually doing is visualizing who we actually are when we visualize ourselves as a deity. The fantasy is that we're not. The fantasy is that we are this poor being struggling with samsara and suffering. And it is said that a person that is easily convinced that they are the Buddha, Vajrayana would be totally useless. So that's the easy and the quick path, by the way. No Nundro, no visualizations, no learning Tibetan. Just convince yourself that you are the Buddha. And you're enlightened. Well, I don't see anyone going out there going, aha! So we're going to do it the hard way. But thinking that you are unworthy, that there is something fundamentally wrong with you. Yesterday I said that's like taking a diamond and seeing it as a lump of coal. There are many analogies to Buddha nature, and one of them is a diamond that has been buried in a, quote, heap of filth. We're not going to go into the details of the composition of that heap of filth. But that's the point, that what we really have is a diamond here, and not a lump of coal. And when you have self-loathing when it comes to purification, you think you're trying to purify a lump of coal, which is an impossibility. You're never going to turn a lump of coal white. So let me get to my talk here, if I can. It's got to be on here somewhere. Oh, I'll tell you what I'll do, though. Just before I came in, I was going over some poetry. I had a little interview. And the music that I played yesterday, another of his songs, some of there are lyrics to it. And so here is the lyrics to one of his songs where there's a chorus. And this is a poem by Emily Dickinson. And after this, then the chorus sings a part of a poem by Blake, William Blake. And the one by Emily Dickinson is about compassion. The one by Blake is about love, which is the heart of what I'm talking about. So the Dickinson poem is, "If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto its nest again, I shall not live in vain." The one about love is, "Love seeketh not itself to please, nor for itself hath any care, but willingly gives its ease, and builds a heaven in hell's despair." One of the reasons why I do this is that I'm trying to demonstrate the importance of the environment that we create for ourselves. We have power of our home, when we're in our car, to create an environment that is conducive to bringing out that Buddha inside of us, or keeping us, you might say, locked up in our neurotic self and our neurotic patterns. And our environment has a tremendous impact on us. Lama Losong, he talks a lot about nutrition and qigong and all kinds of things like that as well. And that too has a tremendous impact on us. And then there's our mind. All of this influences us. And so why not put a lot of energy into all these different areas that you have that affect your level of happiness, your level of love, your level of compassion, that brings out the Buddha nature in you and keeps the negativity and the ego at a lower level. I do occasionally listen to old rock and roll and some new, but I don't, it's not like it used to be, let's put it that way. I'm very careful of what I put into my mind. So actually, I would be interested in a little feedback about what I've said so far. So any comments or questions? Yes? Mm-hmm. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That sounds like you're a student of Lama Losong's. There was actually, some of you that are older remember Harvey Milk, who was assassinated. He was in San Francisco, I think, councilman. And the man that killed him, his defense was that he was eating junk food. Yeah, the Twinkie defense. Yeah, I know this is America. It put him in a bad mood and it caused him to kill the guy. Yeah, I know. I don't recommend trying this on your defense. But you can say the reason why I'm in a bad mood is that I have been eating Twinkies. Any other comments about this? Okay, well then, let's go on with the I've talked a lot yesterday about forgiving ourselves, loving ourselves, being kind to ourselves, and I really can't say enough about this. But what I want, this is my homework to you, and that's why I'm going to be passing out this little exercise that I went through yesterday, that if this is a problem for you and this is difficult to do, that means you need to do it. Mm-hmm. Like I said, if you realize that you are the Buddha, then Vajrayana is unnecessary. You don't have to do that either. But if it's difficult to do, that means you need to do it. So I recommend doing that, even a little bit, even if it's every now and then. But the point is to realize that you have qualities and that the negative attitudes towards yourself are your exaggerated imagination. You see what you don't have and you don't see what you do have. Yes? Yeah, I'll reframe that a little bit, but it's basically what you're saying. I noticed right away when I first became a student of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche that even when he was eating, his back was straight. He was not sitting back against the chair. When he was walking straight, and so forth. And what all of this has to do with is the body's subtle energy, the chi. And again, you have a Lama here that can really teach you a lot about chi and subtle energy. And when your back is straight, when your head and your back are in alignment, it puts the body's energy moving where it is most beneficial for you. And if you're not in that position, then your thoughts get more wild and more out of control. I'm not aware of how one position makes you more neurotic this way and more neurotic that way over the other way. I'm not, don't know enough about it to say anything about that. But I do know that when you're depressed, you don't sit up straight. When you're angry, you don't sit up straight. When you're sleepy, you don't sit up straight. That American furniture, I can't say about other countries, but I had a reupholstery business for 17 years. I got to know furniture from the inside out. It puts you back, relaxed, but it puts your energy in the channels in a position where you're not going to be awake. And so it is important when you're meditating to have, as you said, that straight back. It's important when you're walking to have as straight a back as possible, and so on. In retreat, you can't sleep, at least I couldn't with a straight back, but at least you're sitting up, and you sleep very differently when you are sitting as opposed to laying down. And so I'm just kind of giving a little bit reframing of what you're saying. And this gives us control. Again, what this is all about is not being out of control and at the mercy of our emotions and whatever thought comes into our head at the time. Going back to my squirrel and dog episode, or example. If you weren't here yesterday, this is my example that if you've ever been around a dog and you have a big window or a patio door and the squirrel's on the other side, immediately the dog is at the door chasing after the squirrel. That's his whole existence at that moment. And so a thought comes into our mind, and if we're not trained, we are just like that dog and the squirrel. The thought is there, and boom, we fall for it 100%. This is what our life is focused on at that moment. And the problem is that frequently those thoughts are thoughts that can cause us pain and harm and suffering, and other people pain and harm and suffering. You had a comment or question? Well, I'll tell you, you're very fortunate because I don't know much about this, but I believe Lama Losong probably knows a lot about this.
Yeah, it's always a question of balance. All these things, whether it's meditation or just daily life. Seeking a practitioner to help with that would be a good idea. To create balance and equilibrium. It's always a question of balance, and literally and figuratively. So when you say naturally, that's not natural. So there is something that could be out of balance that could be corrected to improve that.
Yeah, I could use someone like him at my center every once in a while. That's why I invite him. And we're always happy to have him. And as you probably know, he was there just a few weeks ago.
So all the things we're talking about, we talk about feng shui or the energetic qi, and to be upright requires energy. We call it upright qi, and if a person's out of balance or their qi is out of balance, then they're not going to have that same quality. You can tell the qi of the person by the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they express themselves. If the qi is vital and strong, or if it's weak or depressed, they show that in their body, as you say. It's a physical manifestation of their overall vitality. So bringing that to balance, whether it's the food, the diet, the home, the emotions, all those things that impact our vitality. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else before I continue? I'm putting my glasses on, getting ready. Okay. Well, today we're going to talk about other people. I talked a lot about working with ourselves yesterday. And I guess just to review a little bit, I said that we run into difficulties in our life daily, if not hourly. And I said we had these 5 unrealistic expectations of samsara, and to review them. The first one is that I'm the most important person in the room, and that the second one is I should be respected. People should realize that I'm worthy of respect and respect me. And when I read this, I immediately thought of Rodney Dangerfield, who his line was, "I don't get no respect." He was a comedian, by the way. And then the third one is others should live up to my expectations. And the fine print in that one is, and I shouldn't have to tell others what my expectations are. And then the fourth one is I should not be harmed bodily, mentally. At work, my ideas, no one should oppose them. People should jump in behind me and support me. And then 5, life should be fair. And I'm the one that decides what's fair. And needless to say, every last one of those is incredibly unrealistic, because the guy next to us or the woman next to us has the same expectations. On the other side, the people there have the same expectations. So that's why we run into difficulties. That's a good reason why we run into difficulties. We have other difficulties too. You know, we can have health difficulties, we can have financial difficulties, our car can break down, and so forth. But whenever we run into difficulties, what happens is we go one of 2 directions. The first is that it's my fault, that there's something wrong with me. I'm hopeless, I'm helpless, I'm a terrible person. I'm always screwing up. There is just something fundamentally wrong with me. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm just above the mass murderer. And also the guy that scammed 20 elderly old women out of their life savings, and now they're homeless, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, we do that to ourselves. And as I said yesterday, that's like taking this diamond and looking at it as a lump of coal. Because again, we all have Buddha nature. We actually, from the ultimate point of view, we all are already a Buddha. We don't need anything more to be a Buddha. We have to remove all the garbage that we have put on that jewel to hide it. So, if you don't go that direction, then you choose to go this direction. And I read from, starting at the very bottom of page 5, I read the first paragraph on page 6 on this book. I'm not going to read it again, but if you want to, read it again yourself in your own time. And he talks about being a victim. So, samsara is supposed to be perfect, or perfectible. It's amazing. I live in a house that was built about the time my grandmother was born. It's a farmhouse. It's in Wisconsin. She was born in Wisconsin. And it makes me think of my grandmother. although the house she was born in and raised in could easily have been an older house rather than a new house. But no insulation, no indoor plumbing, no electricity, no phone, windows. Now in Florida, these kinds of windows don't matter, but when it's 30 below, these kinds of windows do matter. The kinds of windows that when the wind blows, the curtain blows too. You never have to worry in a house like that about fresh air. There's always plenty of fresh air. And there was a flue opening to a chimney in every room downstairs, so they could put a wood stove in it. So you can imagine, I have heard from old timers, and this was when I first moved out there 45 years ago, that in a house like that, they would have these bowls and the pitchers, so when you get up in the morning you can wash your face. Well, the water in the bowl would be frozen in your bedroom. Yeah, there's a reason why people from Florida do not move up. And why people from where I live move down. But so when you think about that, and then you think about what we have today, and needless to say, healthcare would have been equally primitive. Roads, I have found from going to neighbors old pictures of my house, and it's just a dirt road, and there's horse turds in the road. Yes. Life was different then, you know, and now you've got, not only do you have telephones, you've got cell phones, you've got the internet, I've got air conditioning, I've got a furnace that I can control from my cell phone. Yada, yada, yada. You know, are people today happier than my grandmother? My grandmother wanted to go to town, they'd have to harness the horses to the buggy. And yeah, are people happier?
Maybe in the Netherlands.
They might be less happy, even. She was married probably by the time she was 18, had 7 children, had a 5th grade education. Her husband started the business, and then when he was in his early 40s, he died, leaving her with 7 children and a business and a 5th grade education. Now, she could have gone, oh, shit. But what happened was she hired a man that worked for her husband to manage the business, got her GED, traveled to a city 70 miles away, got a business license. She had to go to school for a few years to get the business license. I don't know how she took care of the kids. She had at least 2 that were in college at this point. Went back, took over the business. I think all of the kids went to college. And she was happy. Oh, poor me. Life is so hard.
And it was the funeral business.
And it was a funeral business. Yes, this was... I have very fond memories of grandmother visiting her when I was a little kid, and since she was working, that meant I would go to the funeral home. And so when I would see grandma, I would see corpses. This shows you what a weird llama I am. Corpses, grandma, happy. She was a wonderful person. She was very strong, but it was a gentle strength. She was a very kind woman. But she knew how to get things done. And as I said, she was happy. It's not our circumstances that cause the problems, it's our thoughts about the circumstances that cause the problems. So, I said that samsara is supposed to be perfect. Well, I'm sorry, it's not perfect. And you all know that it's not perfect, but it's supposed to be. Well, supposed to is a funny word. You know, this again goes back to life is supposed to be fair, and I'm the one that decides. You're the one that decided that samsara is supposed to be perfect and there aren't supposed to be problems in my life. So when we do have problems, we blame others and we don't take any responsibility for at least solving the problems. In India, where there is nothing but problems, they have a saying, and you hear it all the time when a problem arises, and it is, no problem. And it's not that they're denying it's a problem, it's that, well, there's a solution. Well, it might be an incredibly difficult solution, but there is a solution. You might not like the solution, but there's a solution. The first time I flew to India, my baggage was lost, so I went to the lost baggage line, and no problem, you know, we'll find it.
Eventually.
Yeah, well, early the next morning, Lama Losang was with me. We got on a bus and went for 14 hours up to see His Holiness the Karmapa. And of course, they hadn't found my luggage by that time. It was 5 days before I finally got my luggage. But no problem. Yeah, no problem. You know, most problems that we run into, it's not going to kill us. You know, we're going to survive. It's not the end of the world. We don't have to have a meltdown. And you do see this in airports, people having a meltdown. And I've actually found wearing the robes to be very good in an airport, because it would be very bad if I had a meltdown looking like this in the airport. It would really be embarrassing. So anyway, we'll just blame our parents, we'll blame other people, we'll blame the government, we'll blame our age, we can blame anything for why we're having problems. My sister isn't here, so I'm going to talk about her, but shh, don't tell her that I said this. She came up one time to visit our parents at Christmas time, and she has lived in Manhattan for many, many years. And so we went to an art museum. She had a rental car. I took my car to, she parked, I parked. We got out, and then she went over to her car, and her car was gone. Her car was gone, and then I looked, and there was a sign, no parking after 4 o'clock. Oh, it's 4:30. And of course, there were no other cars parked there where she had parked either. And so then she just went on a rant about how in New York City they line up the tow trucks, and as soon as it's 4 o'clock, bam, they tow you. Yada, 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 yada. And I said, have you ever been towed before? Yes. It wasn't her fault. She said, oh, I didn't expect to stay in the museum as long as I did. Well, you know, she was the one that parked there. But we do this all the time. You know, it's not just my sister. Prahlad Rinpoche says it's socially acceptable to do this. People will agree with you. Yeah, that's the way they do it in Manhattan, and they shouldn't do it. One of my students, Dennis, who Lama Losang knows, he likes Wayne Dyer. And so he'll quote Wayne Dyer in this case and say, don't should on yourself. So I'm going to pass that little bit of advice on to you. So when you do this, you are giving up your responsibility to do anything about it, and it traps you. You give up your power. You give your power to other people. You negate your free will. When you refuse the role of being a victim, you take your power back. It's also self-perpetuating. You know, it just becomes like a swamp, a quicksand. You can't get out of it. The more you do it, you develop a pattern, and the easier it is to be a victim the next time. So a victim wants to change the behavior of other people. The bizarre thing about that, about changing the behavior of other people, is that is based on this belief that I can't change my mind. I can't. However, I can change the mind of other people. It's, you know, this is very bizarre thinking, but that's what it's based on. Trying to change other people. I'm right, they're wrong. I'm not going to change my mind. You wonder why people argue with each other? Why people fight with each other? Why people shoot each other? So this is very bizarre behavior. It's very common behavior, and it's important to recognize this behavior when you fall into it. And when you recognize it, if you're really good at keeping yourself imprisoned, then what you will say, this proves that I'm a bad person because I keep doing this to myself. And that's more of this faulty thinking that keeps you powerless. So I'm a victim of other people, or I'm just plain a bad person and there's nothing I can do about it. When you see these faults in your thinking, in your habitual patterns, the awakened thing to do is to do something about it. Realize, well, I can change. There are things that I can do to change these patterns. And say, I'm glad I'm finally seeing this. Now I can do something about it. Now I can get to the root of this. Otherwise, you'll just get angry and you'll just become depressed because you can't change the world. The world is a bad place. The world is against me. Oh, poor me. So just like blaming yourself creates apathy, resentment, anger, and so forth, it's the same way with being a victim. It's a downward spiral of resentment, apathy, anger, hopelessness, helplessness, and of course incredible pain. So this is like taking a lump of coal, or thinking that samsara is a diamond, and what you're experiencing is a lump of coal, and I need to turn this lump of coal into a diamond. Well, samsara is a lump of coal. No other way around it. Now, here's my little joke. You want to know why there's so much stress in samsara? because it takes a lot of heat and pressure to turn a lump of coal into a diamond. You know, they can do it in the lab. So here we are all stressed out trying to turn this coal into a diamond. And we're under pressure all the time. So we have to realize this. We have to accept that samsara is samsara. It can't be perfected. And that when we come to that realization and that level of acceptance, then we can make progress. Otherwise, what we're going to be wanting to do is just make our life more comfortable within samsara. And that isn't so good. It's not a very good approach to take. On the other hand, when you realize this, that then there's space. Things open up for you. You've got space to grow, just like when I was talking about blaming yourself. We forgive ourselves to give ourselves space to grow. When we forgive other people, we give ourselves space to grow. There was an inmate that I ran into, and there were lots of inmates like this, but this one particular one just said it right out. And this is the faulty thinking that goes with being a victim. And I'll read the quote. "I was sexually assaulted as a child. This is why I think and behave the way I do. I can't change the assault, therefore I can't change." That's, in a nutshell, that's the victim mentality. He had a tremendous anger problem, and within a month after saying that, he went, because of his temper, getting into fights and causing problems, he went to what they call the hole, and from there he went to a maximum security prison. They put you there not necessarily because of your crime, but because how much of a behavioral problem and safety problem you're going to be. The fault with that is the sexual assault happened way back, decades ago. He's not being sexually assaulted now. What's assaulting him are his thoughts about the assault. And you can learn to control your thoughts. It's that simple. No matter what your childhood was like, no matter how rotten your childhood was, there's nobody here that's going to be sexually assaulted as a child anymore. It's impossible. There's nobody here that is going to be beat up as a little helpless child anymore. It can't happen. But we hold on to these things like it could happen or it just has happened. And then we suffer. So this is really important. You can be victimized once, and you can be victimized as an adult. You can be sexually assaulted as an adult. You can be robbed. You can have incredibly bad experiences at work, in personal relationships, with siblings, and on and on and on and on and on. But then it ends at some point. And you don't have to live in the past. And I see hands going up, and I'm really glad. So go ahead. Yeah, I would agree with you about that, but it is possible, and you have to overcome this victim mentality, so the person becomes empowered, so they can actually start working on it. And this is why yesterday I had that meditation on loving yourself, because it destroys the self-image, it destroys the self-confidence, it destroys all kinds of things. And but it is workable if working with Chinese medicine and movement exercises and so forth. Great. I'm not trained in those. But anyway, I have worked with a lot of people too. The prison is full of men that were sexually abused as children. And then I've worked with lots of people on the outside too. For some reason or another, it seems to be my karma. So I'll tell you a story. Now, I said I reupholstered furniture. And I had just started meditating, just started coming in contact with Buddhism. And at that time, I had a very strange obsession, not because of being Buddhist, this was before. This is my past life. And I collected tractors, and there was this one man that I had done some trading with for parts. Well, later on, his father comes for upholstery work. And then he starts talking to me. Now, this is a business transaction here. I'm working on his furniture, and he says to me, you know, my first wife died, and then I remarried. And then one day I came across my new wife raping my son. Yeah. I, tried to keep a unsurprised look on my face. And here, I know the son. But for some reason, other people seem comfortable telling me these things. That's when I first started having these experiences. And last year I came here and did Healing the Emotions. The first time I did that at KTD, over half the people that attended would tell me either in a situation like this or through the interviews that they had been sexually assaulted as children. And after that, I said to myself at the end of that program, I need to develop a program on forgiveness. And this afternoon, we're going to do forgiveness of the enemy. The people that you hate. So that's where I'm going on this. And I agree with you. It is difficult. It can be painful because you have to go into these painful, scary places. You have to have emotions come up that you don't want to experience. But it's a workable situation, and that's what I want. I told a little bit about my history. I was not sexually abused, but I was regularly beaten up by my mother, who was mentally ill and would go into rages, just totally hysterical and rages, and totally unpredictable. I've heard stories of alcoholic mothers, drug addict mothers or fathers are the same way, but mentally ill people are the same way. I've actually written an essay on this, and I've had people read it that have had these same kind of, and they'll say, this is my childhood. It might be different, but the feelings of, I had a suicide attempt in the 9th grade, in the 11th and 12th grade. There were numerous times when I was in the closet with a belt around my neck. The self-loathing, the helplessness, the hopelessness, the isolation, the depression. I know it, but I also know there's a way out. And that's why I do these things, is because I don't want other people to suffer. Yeah, you start with yourself. If you don't have love for yourself, you really can't love other people. What some people do, they don't have love for themselves, and they think that they can earn love for themselves by exhibiting love for other people, but it's a charade, and it doesn't work. And so you really have to love yourself. There was a woman that I was just with, and again, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's my karma. But this is a woman back home who I've known since a little girl. She's in her late 30s. She's a nurse. I think she does, her specialty is midwifery, or wifery, whatever it's pronounced. So I've known her since she was a little girl. I've known her parents for over 40 years. And her brother commits suicide. And she has a self-image problem, has been in an abusive relationship for 20 years. And I went over at a dinner table with her and her parents, that little meditation I did yesterday, and she's in tears. And I told her, you need to love yourself. She said, well, I'm all right at work. Yeah, because she's busy, and she thinks that she's proving that she's a good person at work. But when it comes right down to it, she hates herself. I could just tell, when you go through that meditation about loving yourself and the person is sobbing, well, there's a problem here. And I have invited her numerous times to come and meditate, but as you know, most people say, no, I don't want to go there. But it starts with loving yourself, appreciating how actually wonderful and fantastic you are. And it can't come from other people. You could, get involved with a partner who just thinks you are the best thing on the face of the earth. And actually, this is where a lot of abusive relations come in, because when your partner treats you like a goddess and then starts seeing your faults, their delusion suddenly becomes apparent and you become a demoness. And then they got to beat you up. So you don't want to be a goddess. I touched on that a little bit yesterday. I didn't use the word gratification, but what I said was secure. It's comfortable. It's known. There's kind of, it's this attitude that the devil I know is better than the devil I don't know. There's this fear of not being there because it is so secure, so solid, and beyond that is unknown. And of course it's totally, as they say in prison, twisted thinking. That's what they get from the psychologists. This is twisted thinking. It's confused thinking. It's very short-term gratification. It doesn't last very long, but it's habitual. So I've got to go on here, or we're not going to. This is wonderful, but I haven't gotten to what I wanted to get to yet. But now you know why. In fact, now I've got to log in with the password. Oh yeah, life isn't the life that my grandmother was born into. She thought a menu was something you would get at a restaurant. Anyway, what I want to do now is talk about forgiving, working with people that we have harmed. This is kind of a little bit of a change here. That and this is important, that and again, you really need to be able to love yourself, because otherwise if you just start looking at all the people you've harmed, you'll just say, oh, this proves I'm a bucket of manure. but you're probably not going to use that word. The words that I've called myself when I was depressed, I do not want to use in public, and they're recording this, you know. Some troll out there could take this, shorten it up, and make it sound like I am just a foul-mouthed Buddhist monk spewing garbage. And I wouldn't like that. So, what we need to do, again, as I said, to have love for ourselves and to be able to forgive ourselves for the harm that we've caused others and the harm that we've caused ourselves, but look at what we have done to other people. And no matter what we have done to other people, by definition, it has been done in confusion. Even if we wanted to harm people, even if we wanted to kill them, it's because we were confused and totally out of touch with our Buddha nature. That whatever we have done, whatever we have thought, it has not negated our Buddha nature. It has not canceled it. It has not altered it in any way. But it has been done without us realizing that this is contrary to our ultimate nature. So what I want you to do is, for this particular exercise, just think about something, one thing that you have done, or maybe one person, and maybe one or two things that you have done that has harmed that person. There are many people out there that we have harmed. There are some people out there that think we have harmed them. And we really didn't, or at least we didn't mean to harm them. But just like us, there are people out there that are sensitive, and even looking at them at the wrong time can make them think that you were thinking bad thoughts about them, and then they get upset at you. And you probably don't have any trouble of thinking of somebody that you have wanted to harm. Even since I have been a monk, I can think of some episodes in the prison that I had with a guard. In the prison, the chaplain has, you might say, certain territory, and the guards have certain territory. The guards enforce rules and maintain security. As a chaplain, I'm trying to help these men spiritually progress. And so it's not my job to enforce the rules. And sometimes the guards would think that I was too lenient on them. And well, in this case, there were guards that thought I was, and I would be pushing the security rules. They wanted to be pretty strict, and I wanted to let the men at least have a little bit lower tension level here. And there were times when I would do things that violated the rules. Like, you shouldn't yell at a security officer in front of inmates. You know, this is not good to have a chaplain dressed like this yelling at a security guard in front of inmates. Yeah, you get the picture, you know. So even I need to do this exercise. Don't think that I am, you know, don't put me up on a pedestal. Yeah, I'm not a Buddha yet. I did learn a lot from that episode, by the way. That was 10 years ago. And I guess that's a really good point to make, is that you can learn from these episodes when you lose it, whether it be hating yourself or being mad at other people. When you lose it, you can always recover and learn from it. It's not hopeless. The difference between an amateur and a professional is the amateur makes a mistake and gives up. The professional works with his mistakes. I don't care what the profession is. The professional works with the mistakes. The mistakes are workable. That's the teachable moment.